from the basement of La Penta, this is WICR.
Hello everyone, Jersey Joe back here, and it has been a long time since I have talked college football, way too long. If you follow my stuff, you know College Football Corner, the TV show that I did with Anthony Carlo, it was phenomenal, one of my favorite things that we ever did, and I live and breathe college football, so it is very good. And one of the things that came up that I didn't really get a chance to go to, and I was going to go and talk about it on Twitter, but I had so much to say, and you know Twitter only gives you a certain amount of characters and words to use, so why not save all your thoughts for the radio, where you could say all that you want to, and there's not a person in the world who can stop you, unless you say something out of line, of course. But I think at the end of the day, Everett Golson had such a weird season with Notre Dame last year. I'm still kind of racking my brain to try to put his season into perspective. Was it good? Was it bad? I don't know if there's a definite answer. I mean, when you look at the numbers, they're not bad. I mean, 29 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, very high in the interception department, and 3,445 yards. But if there's one thing that I think kind of summarizes his season, it's inconsistency, and I think when I came into the season and I watched him, I was really, really impressed because obviously he had his season where he leads Notre Dame to the national championship game. They lose to Alabama, and I mean, that was inevitable. Alabama was just a historic defensive team. Notre Dame had a quarterback in Golson who couldn't throw for his life. He was really a run-oriented offense, and if you forced them to throw, they were going to be in trouble. That's what you would have had to do to beat Alabama. It wasn't going to happen. Obviously, you have academic issues. He doesn't play the second season. Tommy Rees does. And then he comes back last year, and I thought he looked extremely sharp, and clearly there was an improvement in his throws. I mean, he became a much, much better passer. I mean, you could just see it in the first game that they played of the year. He is a much better, more accurate thrower, and that was evident in the first game that they played against Rice. Really a rout of Rice, but I think the tough thing that kept on happening was the turnovers. Now, the first couple games, I was on the air the first 3 games, and I was talking about how incredibly I was impressed because we already knew how versatile he was. He's a great athlete, so he's got the speed, he's got the legs, he can make all the plays with his feet. The thing that we didn't see with him was his throws with his arm, making accurate, deep throws with his arm, and that's what he was doing. He was throwing the football extraordinarily well. I mean, you look at his game logs, his first game against Rice, 3 rushing touchdowns, 2 passing touchdowns, no picks. The second game, 3 throwing touchdowns, no picks. The third game, 2 throwing touchdowns, no picks, 1 rushing touchdown. The yards, it's all there. He was having an outstanding start to the season. When the trouble comes in is when the turnovers happen, and that happened first with the Syracuse game. And from that point, every single game that he played, after the first 3 games, every single game that he played had at least 1 turnover. I'll even read it to you. 2 interceptions, 1, 1, 2, 1, 4, 1, 1, and 1. The turnovers were just too much to get behind. You cannot have a turnover in every single game after the first 3. And I think the one that really kind of put it all into perspective was the Arizona State game. That game kind of showed why he had such a weird season. Now, Notre Dame lost that game 55-31, and it really was a rout. And it was a rout more than anything because of the 4 interceptions and how Arizona State's defense just ate those up and scored off of them. But I think more than anything, it shows how weird of a season that Everett Golson had because in that one, his touchdowns, 2 touchdowns and then the 4 picks, it's so hard to put it into words because it was good, but at the same time, the turnovers are kind of the thing that headlines everything. His numbers were good. He improved dramatically as a passer and as a quarterback, I think, but the turnovers are what I have a hard time getting around, and that's the difficult thing now. Obviously, now he's transferring to Florida State, and I think that had to happen. You saw in the bowl game that they played where Notre Dame got a nice win against LSU, where Golson and Golson kind of just didn't get I think Malik Zaire and him, they both kind of traded off, and I think Brian Kelly kind of doesn't have. You could kind of tell that he wasn't the biggest fan of Golson, and I think because Kelly is a guy who you can't turn the ball over with him. That's just one thing that he can't accept, and that's one thing I don't think he trusted Golson, and I think he's kind of maybe right in that regard. Now, Golson, I think I'm impressed because, like I said, he became a much, much better quarterback, but if you're a coach, I can understand why you have a hard time getting behind him with all those turnovers, but he's got kind of a good situation here, I think. Obviously, Florida State is a place that a lot of people like. I think Jimbo Fisher is a guy who is a player's coach. I think players really like Jimbo Fisher. He builds really good relationships with his players. I think Everett Golson has a good chance here to be the starter. Now, obviously, Florida State has a lot of quarterbacks on their roster right now, so it's not totally 100% that he'll get the job, but I think most likely will. Sean McGuire is the backup, and we did see him play against Clemson, and look, basically save Florida State's season because we all kind of understand that's the point where Jameis was suspended for that one game, and it was a struggle. It was a battle through and through, but he found a way to get Florida State the victory, and I certainly think that had to do a lot for his confidence, and you've only got to think that he's now kind of had a lot more time to prepare and get first-team reps, and he will get more chance to get first-team reps. So you've got to think he's going to be better, but clearly the talent and the experience is more on Everett Golson's side. It's hard not to see him winning the starting job, but at the same time, I think you've got to be a little concerned because it is so difficult to really put into perspective the season he had with the turnovers and with the good play at the same time. I mean, you look at the Florida State game, the way that he played was very good. He played a really good game. But the turnovers, costly turnovers in that game, and that's the tough thing about Everett Golson. Now, a lot of people think part of the reason he might have gone here is because Jimbo Fisher has a pretty good track record of getting his guys into the NFL. He has good NFL contacts. And Everett Golson, if he does get the starting job, Florida State does have a very good chance to win the ACC. I really do think they do. Now, I think Miami is going to be better. I think Robert Kaya is only going to get much better. I mean, the kid is going to be really good. I like Al Golden. His defense has been proven. I think, obviously, when you look at Dabo Swinney and Clemson, they were the favorites, and now I don't know as much about their plans right now, but I think when you look at Florida State and you look at the recruiting class that they've brought in consistently, they've been up there. Jimbo Fisher's done a great job there. I think he's got an identity of what he wants to do on offense. Everett Golson is certainly a guy that I look at and I think can run what Jimbo Fisher wants to run. Now, the interesting thing that's going to happen here, though, is if Everett Golson, and let's say he does win the starting job, I think he will over McGuire. Now, although I do think McGuire has a lot to like, and clearly he's going to be better, what about the turnovers? If Everett Golson comes out and he starts playing, and this is what happened last year with the turnovers, what's going to happen? And I don't think Jimbo will be hesitant at all to pull him out and try things out with McGuire, because if there's one thing that frustrates a head coach, it's when those turnovers start happening. And again, that is very alarming when you look at Golson's numbers, and he showed every single game of the season after the first 3 games, he did not have one game without a turnover, and that's just something for me I cannot get behind. I just can't. You've got to think there's got to be a moment in that stretch where he figures things out, and I think more than anything, it shows good film habits when you're not they're turning the ball over. It's part of the reason why I liked Marcus Mariota so much coming out of Oregon, is because the guy had 2 turnovers in the regular season last year, 4 total, 2 in the playoffs, 2 in the regular season. That more than anything shows good situational awareness and good film habits, and that's one thing that I don't think Golson had, is situational awareness and good film habits. Now, obviously, when you look at how much he improved heading into last year, you've got to think that was the main priority for him to work on. Cutting down on the turnovers, better film habits, and I have faith that's probably what he did, because when you look at how much of a better passer he became, that took a lot of work. Now, obviously, he had a full year to work on that because of his academic suspension, but you got to give him a lot of credit, because there is a far line between the guys who need work and the guys who actually put in that work. Everett Golson put in that work, and I don't know why you would believe he wouldn't do the same now, because he obviously wants to get into the NFL. I think that's part of the reason he transferred to Florida State, and if he wants to get to the NFL, he has got to dramatically. It's not going to fly with Jimbo. You start these games with all these turnovers, and you have that stretch, and there's no improvement in there with the turnovers. He's going to McGuire, because McGuire has he's got a lot of quarterbacks behind McGuire who want time to play, and are looking at this situation to see how Jimbo handles it, because that's going to be very telling for their future, if they're going to stay and ride it out, or if they're going to seek for a transfer somewhere else. I think there's a lot of things, moving parts for Fisher, that he's got to be careful and he's got to watch. But I think right now, clearly Golson is the more talented quarterback. He's done a lot of good things in his career, and I think if he improves and if he cuts down on the turnovers, I think for me, Florida State will be the best team in the ACC, and I think he really could have a tremendous season with Jimbo Fisher, because Jimbo, like I said, he's a player's coach. Players really like him. I think he's proven with what he can do as a coach, and he's proven what his offenses can do. I think Golson has a high ceiling here with Florida State, but it all comes down to the film room, and it all comes down to the turnovers. More than anything, that is going to either prevent his success, or if he cuts down on them, it will enable him in Florida State to have a very good year. But like a very good year, we are poised for a great year of college football. Cannot wait to be back on the set, on the air, breaking it all down. It is a great time. I live and breathe for college football. Kind of for me, I think I enjoy college football more than I do the NFL, which I never thought that would happen. But just when you can go from Auburn to Oregon to Arkansas to Miami to Florida State, it's just to Ohio State to Michigan, it's incredible, and I live and I love every minute of it. But like I love every minute of it, I love every minute of the Sports Vault, and I will be back in only a couple minutes breaking down more stuff. Who knows what's left to talk about, but if there's something out there, I'll be here to cover it. So stay with me, and I'll be right back.